Welcome to Werezilla's Retrospective. I'm your host, Werezilla, and Uncharted month continues. Now remember how I said that I have a love-hate relationship with the stealth in the last game? That pretty much explains my relationship with the third game entirely. This game has a lot of potential. Really, it does. It teases things about Nate's past, suggests things that we've seen before are not true, the set pieces are bigger and more over the top than ever before, when in combat weapons feel more like they have more weight when firing, I can throw back enemy grenades instead of being forced to roll out of cover and make myself a target, and this is starting to sound more like my usual wrap-up, not intro. Maybe it's because I want to give a good first impression since I'll be saying a few negative things over the course of this video. But enough of that. Let us begin. We open with a segment that feels like it was designed to get a rise out of Yahtzee. In fact, I'll let him describe it for me.
The game opens in London with Drake walking off cobbled streets into an English pub with a motherfucking red phone box out the front where every single member of the clientele looks like Grant Mitchell from EastEnders.
The reason he and Sully are here, however, is much more interesting. They're selling off Nate's ring to this guy, Talbot, but the deal goes sour and a brawl ensues. A few more button prompts than I would like, but hey, it's nice to see that the environment is interactable, with Nate able to knock people into tables, hit them over the head with bottles, and even knock them out of windows. This ends with Nate and Sully cornered in an alley by Talbot and his employer, a woman by the name of Marlowe, who has some personal history with Nate and Sully. Though I'm not sure why she seems upset when one of her thugs, Charlie, shoots them dead. Well, that was a short game. Just kidding. We cut to 20 years earlier on the streets of Columbia where the two met. Nate was trying to get a hold of Francis Drake's ring from a museum based around the guy. Turns out Sully was also trying to get it, with Nate swiping his forged key to the display, only to get confronted by Sully and a younger Marlowe, who here, when Nate is just a teenager, has no qualms with ordering her men to kill him, despite what we just saw in the alley, and Sully intervenes. He doesn't fully buy that Nate is really the descendant of Francis Drake, but sees potential in the kid and agrees to train him and hone his abilities as a treasure hunter.
I see great things in our future, kid. Great things.
So much for greatness. I jest, of course. It turns out Charlie was actually working with Nate and Sully as a mole in Marlowe's organization. Now, despite Charlie being introduced in this game, the interactions between him make it pretty clear that Nate and company are very familiar and friends with him, possibly for years, and I feel it too. He warms up to the player quick with some good dialogue, being just as knowledgeable about history as Nate, and his claustrophobia is also a nice touch. He's a very human character. Anyway, they make their way through the sewers, following Marlowe's trail, discovering an underground railway system where they run into...
Hands up.
Oh, hello, mate. We must have taken a wrong turn somewhere.
Yeah, is this King's Cross?
Don't move.
Fucking Fenris from Dragon Age 2, that's all I needed. This goon is lucky snapping his neck is all I did. I know I'm getting a little off topic here, but let me just reassure people who are familiar with this Dragon Age 2 character, as much as I dislike Fenris, I hate Anders more. While Chloe waits outside being their getaway driver and whatnot, Nate, Sully, and Charlie discover Marlowe's vault of treasures, as well as notes that strongly hint her organization was responsible for the death of Lawrence of Arabia.
Great film.
Hey, Charlie, I said I like you, but interrupting is still rude, even when you do it. So it seems all this time, Nate's ring was meant to be used as a decoder device. Drink your Ovaltine.
Son of a bitch.
After our heroes fight their way through Marlowe's men and escape, they use a map they found, plus Lawrence's notebook, in order to start their search for Iram, the Atlantis of the Sands, concluding that Francis Drake was on a mission to find it on orders from Queen Elizabeth and John Dee.
Who the hell's John Dee?
John Dee, one of Queen Elizabeth's closest advisors. Everybody knows that.
Achoo! Like, everyone knows who John Dee is! Like, where have you been living? Like, under a rock? Group splits up, with Chloe and Charlie going to some ruins in Syria, while Nate and Sully check out an old temple in France, where Talbot's men have followed them. I just like to call attention to this bit where Chloe warned the others they might be in over their heads, but Nate argued this.
Yeah, but this time we have the upper hand. I mean, look, Drake only had half the clues. Lawrence only had half. We have both. And Marlowe has nothing.
It would be one thing if Talbot only showed up after Nate and Sully found what they came here for, an insignia in a hidden Knight Templar's tomb, but you have 2 gunfights with them before that happens. Now, as a side note, the HUD refers to Lawrence's notebook as Drake's journal, but other than that, I feel it justifies why the puzzles in this area are already solved in the book. And hey, one is unfinished, requiring intuition from the player. About time we had a puzzle like that. Now, like I said, Talbot followed Nate and Sully, taking the insignia from Nate, just in time for fucking spiders to come out of the walls to try to eat them. Of course, escaping from that simply means Nate and Sully have literally walked out of the frying pan and into the fire, as Talbot orders his men to burn the place down. And like Lazarevich's men in the last game, Talbot's forces are more focused on killing Nate than escaping the burning structure. Seriously, the place is on fire and coming down around you people! Am I really your highest priority here? Nate and Sully escape, with Sully wondering if it's worth going after Iram, especially since they have no idea what they'll find when they get there. Notably, though, he doesn't back out like he did in the last game. More on that later. Realizing that if they were followed, chances are Chloe and Charlie were too, so Nate and Sully join back up with them in Syria, running into yet another segment that will break if you try to use stealth. And learning from Charlie that Marlowe's forces are part of some secret society that goes back centuries, that Francis Drake deliberately hid info from about Iram from them in the past. This again begs the question if it's worth it, since Francis Drake tried to hide his fighting from the Queen, but Nate wants to forge on. Of course, once Nate, Chloe, and Sully literally turn a corner, Talbot shows up, shoots some kind of toxic dart into Charlie, takes Lawrence's notebook, puts some kind of hypnotic suggestion in Charlie's mind, and vanishes.
You're probably wondering how Talbot was able to do all that. Well, here's what the game actually explains to us about Talbot specifically.
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
Talbot's hypnotic suggestion then takes effect on Charlie, making him attack Nate, though thankfully Chloe's able to talk him down before Sully can cap him in the head. Notice that was his reaction to Nate being in danger, since this game has gone out of its way to emphasize the pseudo-father-son relationship between the two. It was present in the last 2 games, but it's brought to the forefront far more often in this game. There's a lot of moments where they have to work together, helping each other from falling from great heights, moments like this where Sully was willing to shoot Charlie to save Nate. It's interesting to see, but it adds to a criticism of the game that I find hard to ignore, but we'll get to that. Our heroes solve another puzzle, this one being multi-phase with water and light, getting their hands on the second insignia, which for some reason everyone thinks is a good idea for Charlie to hold on to.
Now you see that evil will always triumph, because good is dumb.
Surely enough, Talbot shows up again demanding Charlie shoot Nate, but Charlie fakes being under his sway, I guess the toxin doesn't last long, and shoots Talbot instead, who is unharmed. No, he's not wearing a bulletproof vest, at least I don't think he is. If he is, the game doesn't tell us. He takes the insignia from Charlie, and Marlowe sets the roof he's standing on aflame. Though surprisingly, Charlie survives this, not unharmed since his jump from the roof breaks his leg, but the others are able to get him to safety. Yeah, funny story, Charlie was originally going to take part in the entire adventure, but because his actor Graham McTavish was cast as Dwalin in the Hobbit films, he couldn't stick around for the game's entire production.
And you gotta love Naughty Dog's solution to that. Just take the character he plays, break his leg, and then literally put him on a bus. Although I suppose it could have been worse. He could have last been seen getting on a plane with Henry Blake.
Also, Sully drives the bus out of there. I'd just like to point out that Chloe was introduced to us in the last game, and it's mentioned again here in this one, as the best driver in the business. Yet so far, Nate, Elena, and Sully have done more driving individually than her. Speaking of which, Nate and Sully continue on to Yemen, where another clue is located, and they get some extra help from Elena, who is currently working in the city. By the way, it's not spelled out completely, but what is there suggests that Nate and Elena are either married at this point and are going through a rough patch, or divorced. We just know that Elena is still wearing her wedding ring, while Nate is more focused on the one around his neck. Nate spots Talbot in the streets below him, and at this point are you even surprised that this guy's here too? And snatches back Lawrence's notebook from him. They find the underground ruins while running from Talbot's men, purely by coincidence, and solve some puzzles that surprisingly don't require the notebook, but problem solving by the player. So why did we get it back in the first place then? Whatever, Nate, Sully, and Elena find a star map that leads to the location of Iram, and Nate asks Sully to memorize it instead of copying it down.
Now you see that evil will always triumph, because good is dumb.
Look, I get all the copies of treasure sites he's copied down over the years have constantly been stolen from him, but this seems like an incredibly stupid idea. As they leave, Nate gets hit by one of Talbot's darts and starts hallucinating in a sequence that goes on for too long, in my opinion. When he comes to, he finds himself sitting at a table with Marlowe and Talbot, having unwillingly told them Sully knows where Iram is. And it's here where Marlowe reveals some interesting info.
In fact, I suspect I know you better than anyone, Mr. Drake. Of course, that's not your real name, is it? Mother commits suicide. Father surrenders son to the state at the age of 5. Entrusted to the St. Francis Boys' Home. It's also Dickensian.
What's this at the end of the page? A presumed dead older brother. After a chase scene and then a difficult but winnable brawl with Talbot, remember this point for a later video, Nate gets knocked out and captured by Ramses the Pirate. Now, despite being a minor filler villain, he's enjoyable enough that it kinda makes you wish he was a more important character. Now wait a minute, if you've played this game, you might be asking why I say he's a minor villain, but since the following segment in a shipyard and later on his boat is rather lengthy, filled with some visually exciting moments. The reason is because at the beginning he tells Nate he's captured Sully, and the entire time going through this part I thought, he's lying to Nate, he never captured Sully, Nate's kind of an idiot. Honestly, I wanted to be wrong about this, but I wasn't. I was right. So all that swimming around shipwrecks, firing RPGs at smaller boats before leaping onto a bigger one, all in the middle of a storm and subsequent escape when the ship capsizes, which apparently isn't a big deal for Ramsey's men since they are more focused on killing Nate than escaping, was all padding.
Now, I said 2 videos ago that the fans of this series like to say that the set pieces are a good thing because they emulate the action movies that these games are inspired by. Unfortunately, I know for a fact that a movie would not include such a lengthy and costly to make section because it is padding! For crying out loud! Even the Indiana Jones movies, all their action sequences were affected by the plot and drove it forward!
In another display of Nate's good yet also bad luck, he somehow survives the storm and washes ashore on Yemen. Only for Elena to reveal to him that Sully really has been captured by Marlowe and is on her way to Iram now. Nate and Elena have a brief talk that again suggests something is getting in the way of their relationship, possibly Nate's obsession with Francis Drake. Hey, wait a minute, that would have made for a better title, Drake's Obsession! Elena's sources reveal a plane is sending supplies to Marlowe, so the two plan to sneak into the airfield it's docked at to sneak aboard. After another segment that's impossible to stealth kill all the enemies, even though the dialogue between Nate and Elena teases at that being an option, Nate urges Elena to stay behind because he's afraid he'll lose her. Hey, as long as she doesn't walk right up to a man holding a grenade, I think she'll be fine. Well, she wasn't able to follow, but she was able to drive Nate up to the plane as it takes off in a weird reversal of the climax from Toy Story 2.
And then Nate freezes death in the plane's cargo hold as it takes off. Okay, fine, I made that up. That's not what really happened.
No, what happens next is even more over the top. Nate is spotted by one of Marlowe's goons and opens the back hatch of the plane. This goes very poorly for him, as this leads to all of the cargo getting sucked out. The plane gets torn in two, and Nate is the only survivor as he grabs onto a box of cargo that was apparently the only one with a parachute. By the way, what is up with this glitch? I don't remember it on the PS3 version, so why is it on the PS4 remastered version? After grabbing the gun that was on the title screen and posing for the box art, Nate continues through the desert. I get the purpose of this segment, it shows how lost Nate is, but it works a little too well as I can't tell if I'm making any progress. Impressive when you consider there is still a linear path to follow. This eventually ends with some friendly natives finding Nate and their leader, Salim, warns him that Iram is housing an evil jinn that's corrupted its people and caused the city to collapse. Thankfully, Nate doesn't dismiss this out of hand like he did with the Chintamani Stone's powers. Now, people familiar with the series will recognize the next bit where Nate and Salim get into a truck chase with Marlowe's crew that includes jumping from truck to horse and back as an improved version of the truck chase from the last game. That's true, but it also harkens back to a similar action scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. There's been a lot of cues from the Last Crusade, actually, with the emphasis on the father-son relationship between Nate and Sully, the flashback to Nate as a teenager getting into as much trouble as he would as an adult on a regular basis, clues to a lost hidden treasure in the tombs of Knights Templars, a group of Arabs that know about the treasure and warn our heroes about it while also opposing the villains by firing upon one of their convoys, while the hero finds his captured father figure. I don't know how to feel about this. It's all led to some fun gameplay, but on the other hand, The Last Crusade was the first Indiana Jones film I saw as well as my favorite. I should be upset about the blatant similarities, especially since we're not done with them just yet. Nate and Sully are reunited, but lose Salim and his men in a dust storm. That apparently doesn't hinder Marlowe's men since they can see just fine in the storm. Fortunately, Nate and Sully find the entrance to Iram. Its sky is partly obscured by the dust storm, but not completely, so what the hell. This time, we actually did arrive by plane, so this should have been found a lot sooner. Nate drinks some water from a fountain, an eclipse appears in the sky, and then...
Now that's a hell of a thing.
Shot to the heart, and you're too late, darling. You give love a bad name.
Nate has a much stronger reaction to Sully getting shot here than they did in the first game, as he charges after Marlowe and Talbot, fighting off their goons, all of whom turn into Ghost Rider when they're shot for some reason. Presumably that's the Jinn's doing. Of course, Nate is tripping out the same way he was in Yemen, so you can probably guess something's wrong. Like, Sully's not dead and Nate's hallucinating. If you guessed that, then you would be right. Figures. If a character already has had a fake-out death, or in some cases did die but came back to life, their chances of dying later are much lower than other characters. The two conclude that the Jinn is corrupting the water and that Marlowe's people want to control... Well, it's actually not clear why they want the Jinn, but since they have malicious intent, and Francis Drake felt it was worth hiding this place from them, it's probably best to stop Marlowe here and now. Nate shoots the crane, lifting the Jinn out of the water, and another 2 shots to the ceiling are enough to make Iram collapse. Yeah, the numerous explosions at the base of the Tree of Life causing Shambhala's collapse in the last game makes sense, but a few shots here less so. Yes, Sully commented that the place looks like it's so old it might collapse at any moment, but this still doesn't feel like it's enough. They run into Marlowe and Talbot on the way out, and Marlowe gets stuck in a sinkhole. She dares Nate to save her and Francis Drake's ring to prove his greatness. I'm not sure how this proves anything, but I guess that doesn't matter, since Nate fails to save her and the ring. He gets into one last fight with Talbot in a brawl, oh look, more bookends, and finally kills his confusing ass. Seriously, why he had a toxin that has the same effect as the Jinn's infected water, as well as his ability to appear places really quickly as if he was able to teleport, was never explained. Salim leads Nate and Sully out of the city as it sinks into the sands, and we end with Sully revealing he held onto Nate's wedding ring. Nate and Elena reconcile, and they all head off in a recolor of the plane Sully had in the first game, ending on another bookend. Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception is a game that I have mixed feelings on. It's a lot of fun and has some good ideas. Some new characters that won't be forgotten by fans of the series, plus some good bits with the 3 regulars. The puzzles aren't all spelled out for the player for once, and cool moments that felt like Naughty Dog looked at the train fight in the last game and thought, how can we top that? Which I'd like to say they did. It's a bit sad Naughty Dog comes up with the set pieces first and then writes the story around them, which certainly explains that ship segment in the game. I haven't talked about the music in the franchise, but it's damn effective, especially during the hallucination scenes. But that leads to what's wrong with the game, a lot of which ties back to Talbot. What's his deal and how he's connected to the Jinn, assuming he is at all, is not clear. The developers had to come out and reveal he's a magician, but that's hardly an answer. Another YouTuber by the name of Joseph Anderson reviewed the entire series as well, and when he got to the third game, he makes a recurring joke that Talbot is a cyborg. Can't say I blame him, although with that name, I'm more inclined to think he's a werewolf. It feels like there were some story bits left out, making me wonder if the ending was rushed. I looked into it, and nothing can really confirm nor deny it. See, The Last of Us was being worked on at the same time, so I can understand why someone would think that. Speaking of which, who else wanted to learn more about the whole Nate's last name isn't really Drake and might not actually be descended from him after all? Well, we don't get anything regarding that, at least not in Drake's Deception.
And then there's the Indiana Jones parts. I don't hate it, but I certainly don't love it either.
You may have noticed the game tried to take things a bit more seriously with the family-esque relationship between Nate and Sully, as well as Nate's obsession, along with people trying to talk him out of it. Maybe it's just a result of how the story was written, or perhaps there is some truth to the rumors the ending was rushed, but either way, that does lead to the Last Crusade similarities being a lot more obvious. Sure, the previous games wore their influences on their sleeves, but those games borrowed small elements from a variety of adventure movies. This one is more focused on one specifically, and not just any adventure movie, but one of my favorite films. Now, there's enough differing details and trappings of the Uncharted setting to make it better than, say, Aragon, but now I'm just damning the game with faint praise.
And like The Last Crusade, I expected this third entry in the franchise to be the last one, which for years it was. And then, we got one last romp with these familiar set of characters, and a long-lost family member.
Go! Well, thanks very much, I'll take that.